The various organizations that are working at 5G were at the conference.
Okay.
You also had NGMN really go into the details of their white paper.
Okay.
They released it at the Mobile World Congress. So this was really the first big conference, in my mind at least, that talked about the details of that. So there was progress in that, I think a better understanding for the industry to understand the NGMN recommendations on 5G. You also had key stakeholders that were presenting at the conference. You had key stakeholders in the audience that were all kind of taking in, what NGMN had to say, and so it's really a sharing of information and viewpoints about, what will or could 5G look like in 2020 and beyond. I don't think there was any contentiousness or huge disagreements among the key stakeholders because it's early in the process. And we're not to what would be considered the standardization or IPR or these types of things, but it's more of, here's our vision. So even if a vision would disagree a little bit, I don't think anyone's going to, throw tomatoes at the stage at this point.
Yeah, that fun stuff, that comes later in the process. Obviously, that'll be fun later. But you're right, it is, I guess, at the right time. I mean, here we're about 5 years out at least. Good time to at least get all the people at least on the same page. All the information kind of out there, so you can kind of then start sifting through all the information and figure out what's probably the best way to go with this thing. Yeah,
the way 4G Americas looks at this, we look at it as these networks will be 2020 and beyond, and we focus on the word beyond because there's a lot of work to do. I mean, if you want to really make a increment, a drastic change in our technology with LTE Advanced and LTE being the mobile broadband foundation, but a drastic increase in the technology that would be, increased efficiency, increased flexibility, and increased capacity and increased performance, then there's a lot of work to be done. And this is just the initial discussions about what type of work needs to be done. It's not settling in on a specific type of, technology that will be the 5G technology at this point. It's really like, in our paper, we actually had 16 technology recommendations to be considered for 5G that together would be a monumental increase in flexibility, efficiency, capacity, and performance. And those we feel have to be worked on a great deal for them to be considered 5G. So it's just the early stages, but early stages, everyone has to go through these cycles. And I think the fact that NGMN put on that conference, and there's other events going on around the world for, again, the discussion of these things, it makes sense. I mean, there's another conference in North America coming up in April called the 5G Forum in the U.S. In Silicon Valley area, as well as the WWRF event in Silicon Valley in April. So a lot of discussion is now happening on 5G, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you guys are very much about the 2020 and beyond aspect of this, because again, and we see a lot of the hype around it right now, and people are talking about it like it's coming out next week.
Right.
In reality, yeah, you're right. I mean, we're still got a lot of runway with 4G. LTE still got all the LTE Advanced stuff that we can still play around with. So
yeah, I mean, I want to be very clear with 4G America's viewpoint. We look at LTE and LTE Advanced as being really the mobile foundation for the future. And we think the roadmap of technology innovation in LTE, LTE, and Advanced is tremendous. Yeah. Right now, you have 381 commercial LTE networks in 123 countries, which is substantial if you look at the uptake on that. You also have 56 LTE Advanced networks at this time. So again, substantial increase in moving from LTE to LTE Advanced. And you're already reaching a point where the predictions are that you'll have 70% of the world's population covered by 2020. So if you think about the tremendous strides in LTE and LTE Advanced, the LTE coverage that you have by 2020, and even the progress of LTE to this point, you see why we're so bullish on the technology. And we're just really at the tip of the iceberg for deployments of LTE Advanced. I mean, we've seen carrier aggregation deployed, but there's going to be many more announcements. Sprint made an announcement this week about their plans. There'll be many more announcements about the various features and techniques of LTE Advanced that are going to be used. So we're real pro bullish on LTE and LTE Advanced for a long time.
Yeah, and it seems like too, I mean, at least from the people I've talked to, at least initially in the process, I mean, it seems like even the 5G standard, whatever that's going to be, could be somewhat LTE based. So, I mean, it's not like LTE is going to go away. I mean, obviously the transition from 3G to 4G kind of saw, there was still some core and stuff you could use in 3G networks, But it seems like from 4G to 5G, you're going to be using reusing pretty much a lot of what's already out there, because there is, again, the all IP network, and it's like no reason to get rid of that. So
yeah, so there's a lot of things. I mean, there are different opinions though that you're starting to see by various companies about, we have to rethink the entire network. No, it's true. I mean, there's some really interesting and innovative ideas that are coming from various companies, and I think again now's the time to discuss those ideas. But when you look at LTE, it's not like when we go to 5G that you're going to rip out your LTE and LTE Advanced. I mean, you have 600 million LTE subscribers today. Yeah. You're gonna cross 1 billion in probably late 2016, early 2017, and then on top of that, like I said, you're going to have 70% of the world's population covered with LTE by 2020. So there's no reason to look at LTE or LTE Advanced as if you're going to need to rip it out, because you won't. Yeah. It will be a foundation layer, even if we start to look at some of these ideas that are maybe not as mainstream as others, where you totally re-engineer what you're doing and how you think about the mobile broadband networks of the future. Trying to solve some of these customers. But it's a great time in the industry, because I do think a lot of people are talking about these ideas, and there's a long ways to go.
Sure. Okay. Well, I will stop being so negative about all these new technologies coming out. Obviously, I guess it's possible. Again, like you said, this could be a good foundation. Something else could build on top of it. But again, like you said, LTE definitely has a lot of runway still to go. So it's still got quite a bit of life in it there too. Yeah. And obviously,
one of the things too is interesting is that different parts of the world have different challenges possibly when we look at 5G. I mean, if you look at the North American market, for instance, and even parts of Asia Pacific, the amount of mobile broadband connections that are being supported by the networks and the lack of spectrum that's available really means that you do have to start thinking of really innovative ways to basically serve the marketplace. We just had a AWS-3 auction in the United States, and we saw how, from an example of how valuable the spectrum is. So we're going to continue to have to figure out that there's not that much more spectrum out in our world when you start thinking about below 6 gigahertz. So we got to start looking at how do we use spectrum above 6 gigahertz, and that kind of gets into the idea of, well, maybe the 5G technologies can think about how we utilize millimeter wave and centimeter wave type technology. So there's a lot of work on innovation that needs to be done, and I think that's we're getting there. But LTE and LTE Advanced are going to be out there trying to solve the mobile broadband connection and mobile broadband data demand that we have here.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, the spectrum auctions, like you said, I mean, it did show quite a bit of demand. And I mean, speaking of spectrum auctions, I mean, we've had one already in Canada. We got another one set up in Canada here coming up soon. We have the one in the U.S. I know the U.S. is talking about the 3.5 gigahertz now too, as another small cell or unlicensed kind of working together there. So some interesting work there. And then obviously the incentive auction at some point, 2016 or so. So a lot of auction, a lot of spectrum getting at least bandied around for potential use going forward. So that's
And in Latin America, same way, we're starting to see the governments really understand how important spectrum is to the whole idea of moving along their mobile broadband networks, as far as the progress of the networks, the investment in infrastructure and devices, and how it helps them from an economic and social level. So we are seeing progress in Latin America as well. But spectrum is definitely continues to be a key for the marketplace. When it comes to providing services, mobile broadband services to the customer. And it's not just mobile broadband services either. It's this whole idea of Internet of Things and machine to machine. We've seen a real groundswell of support about, hey, this is really going to be a productivity tool for industries, vertical industries, and therefore we're going to see a need for more ideas and innovation for Internet of Things, because 5G and even LTE and LTE Advanced need to serve that market even better.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, obviously this week I know there's a Detroit Auto Show going on. There's been a lot of announcements coming out just about more connected cars and things like that. I mean, that alone is a huge market that's just growing like crazy, it seems like right now. So yeah, I mean, the market's out there for IoT and things like that. It's kind of weird to think ahead another 5 years where we're going to be in terms of the need and the use of mobile broadband services. I mean, obviously now it's crazy, thinking 5 years back to where we are now. Another 5 years, it's going to be definitely a big challenge for the industry to meet that.
Yeah, and that you see a pretty common kind of foundation of the different organizations when they look at 5G, that the IoT and machine-to-machine marketplace is something that needs to be addressed, and that needs to be addressed in lower energy use, so that a module for IoT might be able to last 10 to 15 years, and also have a lot less signaling
Yeah.
characteristics than a connected device that's a smartphone or something like that. Although we want to increase the mobile broadband smartphone battery life as well.
Sure.
But you see a lot of things in the kind of the 5G requirements and use cases for connecting billions upon billions of machine to machine or IoT type modules, and a lot of that gets to do with less signaling, less energy use, those types of things.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting to watch that. And obviously, at some point, we'll be looking at the 5G Americas logo coming up at some point as well, I'm sure. But we'll leave that to the side for now.
No announcement to make at this time.
Yes, I got you. So, well, great. Hey, Chris, definitely appreciate the insight there.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
All right.